All right, welcome everybody. We get to connect again and play. So welcome to Advancing Consciousness series. And my name is Franco Di Nicola, if anybody doesn't know me already. And I will be doing the different workshops, different episodes. And tonight's episode is episode 14, and we're going to talk about neutrality. What it is and the power within it, because a lot of people do not understand what that is, because there's a lot of confusion around neutrality, meaning that we're very passive or anything of that nature. So we're going to get into the depth of that. We're going to play with it, and we're going to look at the power behind it, what it really means, because of the miscommunication and understanding that people have, to bring certain levels of clarity and that you can utilize within your experience of life. So for any of you that have not had the opportunity to join us this past Saturday, we had a workshop bringing the new you out to play in the new world. And very much so, our new world has been unfolding, and many of us are now even having the opportunity to start to connect that part of ourselves. And it's really about bringing you onto that playing field, the new playing field. Because really, what are we doing? We're letting go of the old aspects of ourselves, and we're now going into the newest form of ourselves that's emerging through us. So if you haven't had the opportunity to join us live or ordered the video and audio recording, we will have in the description the link for you to be able to get the video and audio recordings. And also, Kimberly would be posting it in the comment sections at this point. So, as for the ones that have participated with us and so forth, we have a link that we have provided for you to be able to watch the replay. But that is not the final product. I am still in the process of chopping it all up, cleaning it out, and putting in different categories so that you have it at your disposal in a way where you can use it much more freely, so that you can go into the topics and the different sections, because we also have processes and we have meditations, so you can go to there where you want to repeat it maybe more often than doing the whole thing. But I do recommend to watch it completely. And if you're new to the series, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Vimeo, we do have all the episodes from episode 1 till now. So we had the introduction episode, we've had today's 14th episode, but one of the episodes, number 9, we've already had 4 parts to it. So we're really basically at 18, 19 episodes as of today. So each one is there to assist you with everything that's going on, because we're now very much more wanting to align with the highest aspects of ourselves and really get a deeper understanding how we can navigate through all the things that are playing out. Not only what's been playing out on a collective scale, but what's playing out in our own personal lives way before we got into this particular segment of our experience of life. And so tonight we felt that, or to this afternoon, depending on where you are, we wanted to look at this whole idea of neutrality, because neutrality is a very powerful tool once you understand what it represents. And so we wanted to bring some clarification around that and be able to see how we could utilize it and how we could really, really advance in a big, powerful way.
Just let you know, the internet's good. It's choppy, okay?
Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention before we get started into the neutrality, should we have any issues with the internet where the signal drops off or anything of that nature, and you can't, because we're at the mercy of what the internet's doing at this point in time, and we have it set up as best as possible to be able to stream, but because of the load, it's been going up and down. So should there be an issue at any point in time and it becomes very choppy, you can reboot it, whatever you want to call it, refresh it. But if it's still an issue and we notice that the recording itself has a lot of issues, I will repost a fresh copy, which we are recording at this time, so that it will be available. So I'll load that up for you to access. Okay, so let's play with the neutrality component. So neutrality, a lot of times we look at life and say, well, you know, life is about having the highs and lows, that we only flourish in the highs and lows, that in fact, going into neutrality is passiveness, meaning that we're not, what do you call, passionate in one way, and we're not also feeling the opposite. It's like, it's this dead space. What does that mean, neutrality? I mean, I got to be neutral when I'm facing whatever I'm looking at or something of that nature. So a lot of the understanding, and I know when I introduced the neutrality, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that introduced, because there's a lot more talk about it now and so forth. But years ago when I talked about, people weren't too open to the idea of neutrality, because it was like, yeah, what does that mean? I mean, like, I don't have any zest in my life or anything of that nature. I can't really, play in the way we want to play. But that was never the case. The thing is, to understand neutrality is that you're in what people also call now 0 point, full spectrum, we're also going into a holistic aspect. Holistic. We're also going into what we call source essence. Oops. Source essence. So how does that all work? From a word like neutrality. Well, in neutrality, you're basically fully embracing the full experience of yourself. You're not polarized. You're not going to have the pluses and minuses, the positive and negative. You're not going to have the dark and light. You're not going to have rights and wrongs, goods and bads, and so forth. In neutrality, you're not driven by your operating system. You're not driven by your environment. You're not driven by circumstances. You're not driven by whatever agenda is going by. We're not driven by the stories that we have taken on as part of our life. And it does not have an emotional charge that actually can impede our full experience. In neutrality, you're really opening yourself. So when you're not in neutrality, you're in what you call polarity states, for example. So you got two streams. You got your positive, you got your negative, okay? And of course, everything that's associated with that, the light, dark, positive, right, wrong, good, bad, and all of that. So as you, the observer at this point, whoops, I'm doing that doesn't look good. You, depending on how you're operating within yourself, you're looking through those viewpoints, okay? So depending where you get triggered, you're either looking at it saying, oh, I need to feel good. I feel good because I got what I wanted, or whatever it may be. And you'll also notice that when you're in that state, you may be more judgmental on the negative, and you may also feel in one way or another that the negative can actually pop in at any point in time. Should a trigger come in and then you get into the negative, then you kind of see what's going on a negative perspective. But both of those are very narrow-minded or narrow viewpoint of life. So in neutrality, what you're looking at, you're now looking at it from a very open perspective, and you see every detail without the filters. Therefore, you now can see your environment, your experience, other people in its truest essence, beyond the roles that they may have played, beyond the fact of what anybody believes or thinks. Because in this polarity world, beliefs have a very powerful effect on how we play our life. Our surroundings, everything dictates what path we take, what choices we make, what choices we don't make, what direction our engagements with others are going to take. All of it is governed by whenever you're in polarity. So polarity, what it does is actually in a lot of cases puts blindfolds and not seeing the whole thing. So for example, you're connecting with someone and instead of seeing, let's take a loved one, instead of seeing that loved one for their true essence of who they are, see the bigger picture of them, the multi-dimensional aspect of themselves, to be able to see the beautiful being that they are, which is another aspect of you as source. You're seeing them through programs and being that whatever role they play. So if they're playing a bit of a negative role or an unconscious role, you label them. And once you're labeling them, you're out of neutrality, and what happens is you see them as a small person instead of their full aspect of themselves. And we do this with ourselves too, because as long as we're in the right, wrong, good, bad, we see and experience ourselves in the smallest version as possible. And the more we have programs and so forth that dictate right, wrong, good, bad, the smaller our world looks, the smaller our expression and experience of life becomes. So you end up playing in a very tight, confined state. And we've all been there, and many of us are still playing with it and just starting to open up. So right now, look at all that's going on. There's so much fear being projected. There's so much concern about our well-being, not only for what's going on, but what's the potential of it? How long is it going to go? What is it going to look like, or anything of that nature? So now, the part of us that's really engaged in that is really working on the polarity world. Because polarity in itself uses fear as a very powerful component. And we had a whole an episode on fear, and we even did a meditation to work through the fear part. And please repeat it over and over again. Now what you're looking at is you're going by whatever is being said, because you've got such a narrow viewpoint that whatever comes in as information, you end up adjusting accordingly to create your reality response and your observation accordingly. You're not seeing an open. But when you're in neutrality, 0 point, full spectrum, holistic state, and source essence, you now see the big picture. You see all of it. You see the dance. You're not seeing just a small piece of it. You're seeing the whole thing. Not only are you seeing the whole thing, you can see all the opportunities within it. You're not going into a narrow focal point. Well, we need to protect ourselves. We need to be doing this, or we need to be doing that, or I can't venture out in one way or another because of this is going on. No, from a neutrality point of view, it doesn't matter what you hear, what you're exposed to, what you're actually receiving from the environment. You're very open to just observe the big picture. And by observing the big picture, your options, your probability, your creative ability expands completely. Because in neutrality, your capacity to create in clarity is expanded immensely. You're not limited to a limited creation. And this applies on so many levels, even in our day-to-day life and interactions. Okay? So, for example, if you have a loved one or child or anybody at this point in time, and they're maybe going through whatever they're going through, when you're looking at it in neutrality, you could see what they're experiencing. And you're able to access a higher level of knowing to be able to guide them and to bring clarity to them so that they access their own clarity. So you're not going to see a child misbehaving only and say they're being bad, which is a polarization. You're seeing a child, what you can call misbehaving, and you say, okay, I'm seeing that it's wanting my attention. I can see that this child is not normally this way, and no one's normally anything, but what's going on? So you now approach the child and say, well, you really want my attention right now. What are you feeling? What's going on? but you're neutral. You're not having emotional charges coming up through you because you're not reacting. Okay? The same thing with our own programs. If it gets triggered, we're not going to react because we're not in focusing on those polarities, or what we call positive, negative, and what we call the lack of consciousness. Because what we're doing when we're talking about source essence, we're actually tapping into the source, what we call higher aspects of ourselves. So in that, you become a very powerful instrument. For example, if you are trying to assist someone and they're going through an emotional challenge regarding, say, a relationship with their loved one or a partner, okay? Now, in that regards, they may be going through a difficult time, and if you are still playing in polarity, right, wrong, good, bad, when you see that, you may have a tendency to use your own stories, programs, belief systems to support them through it, in a sense of saying, yes, that person shouldn't have done that, you know, that's supposed to be your partner, or whatever else. So what you're doing is putting fuel to already the state that they're dealing with. Okay? So you can see that, and that works in any, what do you call it? Any circumstances, and it could be from anyone. But when you are in a state of neutrality, now you're looking at your friend or whoever is going through this challenge and say, okay, I understand what you're going through. I understand how it could feel for you. But let's take a closer look at this, because you're not having any of your stories projected into it. You're not reacting. You're not polarizing it as right, wrong, good, bad. Because I've seen this with therapists. I've seen it with other people, because they're operating within the confine of their own belief system. And then, of course, because they're still giving power to it. Because ego itself is the main driver of the polarized world. You know, and I hear this from people a lot of times. They're saying, well, we are here on a polarized world. The world is designed to be polarized. Well, that's not true. It was never designed to be polarized. However, it was modified to become polarized so that we can go through the polarized experience. But now we're disabling the polarization, and that's why the unification, the oneness, the neutrality is coming back into our natural design, because our natural design is neutrality. It's playfulness. So what else does neutrality do? Not only can you assist others, not only can you navigate through yourself, even anything that plays out with you. Say you have a story that comes up in your life from the past, or something that has an emotional charge, which, you know, has a very powerful effect on you at times, especially if there's an emotional charge and a really deep story about what that represented. Because a lot of times what we do is we put labels. We put labels and definitions and so forth to whatever happened. But that was designed in the polarized aspect of yourself, the polarized world. So should a story come up and you look at it from a neutral point, you're now going to look at the story very clearly and say, okay, that's what played out. How did I feel about it before? What did I really experience at that time? And what was I actually attached to the idea was happening? So now that when you look at it, it looks very different, and it doesn't have an emotional charge, and you could see the bigger picture. Because many of us, you know, look at the beautiful canvas of life, for example, and this is just an analogy, and we look at this little dot here. And that dot can be one of those stories. So here you are, you've lived 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and you have 50 years of experiences, 50 years of giving yourself the opportunity to really play with all aspects of life. And many people end up still looking at that one little dot that came from one story that may have been 2 years old or something of that nature, version of you. But in neutrality, you now look at the dot and say, well, really, what's the dot all about? Yes, I understood what it was at that time as a 2-year-old. It's very different than it is now. So what are we doing? We're opening it up so that we're no longer focusing on the dot. We're looking at all of our life and say, wow, what a beautiful ride. Because in neutrality, in 0 point, okay, in our full spectrum, holistic, source essence, and so forth, the dance of life is just that, the dance of life. And it's exuberating because you get to see the journey you've taken. You get to see all the experiences you've had. And now many of us have repeated those experiences over and over and over again, but that's okay too, because each time it was a little bit different. Each time was a recreation of some sort. But you see the beauty of life and say, okay, look at all the opportunities I had to experience, but also all the things I've gained. Now, I may have gained a tremendous amount of experience, but I haven't been using it. In neutrality, you say, okay, what can I use as my experience, my knowledge, what I've gained from having those rides in my life? So in neutrality, you're able to use all of that. You get to use it without labeling it and putting them in compartments. Because a lot of times our stories and experience we put in boxes. Okay? And we have many boxes. And what happens is anytime something gets triggered, we jump in those boxes or we unload the box and bring it into our experience. But those boxes were all created within the ego, of course, through positive, negative, the polarity aspect of it. Now, in neutrality, what it does for us, not only are we seeing the bigger picture, we see the larger possibilities and opportunities. So what you do is you end up having more freedom to play much more than you have in the past. So that way, in neutrality, you're no longer isolating any part of it. You're just saying, okay, what does resonates for me? What do I feel an inclination? What is my preference to play? Because instead of seeing 2 options, you now see hundreds or thousands of options. And you can look at the thousands of options and say, okay, which one or which cluster would be the one I want to play with. So you can see what we can do. Now, in neutrality, you are very powerful, okay? And what I mean by that, the power comes in your creator aspects. So you become powerful in the sense of where you can navigate every aspect of your life. And you not only do that, you can use your imagination without being inundated by fear or the fact what could or couldn't happen. Because again, you also understand in neutrality that you are the navigator driver, that nothing outside of you has any effect on you. You could utilize the environment as part of your experience if you choose to bring it in, but it's not outside of you and it's not overwhelming or, in this case, overriding what you choose. Now, a lot of times you say, well, I didn't choose to do this, and that's true from my ego conscious aspect. Probably not. But from a higher perspective, meaning from your soul, your human entity, your body, and your overall consciousnness, you said, okay, I want to play there because either I want to expand it, grow with it, and learn from it, and experience something that I haven't experienced before, or I can bring up whatever I need to bring up so I can see it and move along and purge it out of my system, or purge it out of my operating system. It could be a story, it could be a belief, it could be a program, and so forth. In neutrality, the whole idea of fear doesn't have very much power for you. Because in neutrality, there is very little access to the idea of fear. Because you see from neutrality a much more playful aspect of things. And you could see the many options. Because for you to play fear, to experience fear and to get really caught up, you have to have a very, very narrow point of view. And you have to be quite disconnected from all the other aspects of yourself for you to have fear. So the ego will say, oh, this is going to happen to you. Or, we shouldn't do this because of what we saw or anything of that nature, that somebody else went through that experience. Oh, we watched it on television or whatever, whatever we've been exposed to. So in that regards, what we're looking at it's making the viewpoint, like I was saying earlier, instead of having 1,000 different options and choices and so forth, it looks at only at one, and it may be a minuscule version, you know, of something that is a belief system or a story or something of that nature, and it makes it huge. And it negates everything else. So that all you can see is that tiny little thing that gets expanded. And that's why emotions get involved, because the fear gets blown into it. So fear limits our viewpoint. Polarity, right, wrong, good, bad, all of that stuff also creates separation. And that's the other part, because this is why I said it's holistic, because there is no separation. Because once we understand our true nature of ourselves and our essence of who we are as source, there is no separation. Everything is a construct. Everything is within the field. Everything is a potentiality. Everything is a holistic part of it. It's not outside of you in any way, shape, or form, or in your creation capacities. It's all inclusive. So in neutrality, you bring all of it in. Like, for example, people are talking about light, dark, and all of that stuff, and, you know, I'm the light bearer and there's the dark, you know, and so forth. Or, you know, the dark is the shadows, or whatever it may be. Well, the only reason we say it's a shadow because maybe we weren't so much aware of it, but at the same time, those shadows actually play a very powerful role. So it really goes outside of the idea that there's good and bad, right and wrong. Now, yes, we've agreed to play with a lot of that, and we've given a lot of power to it, and we've really engaged in all of it. However, at the same time, for us to be able to get into a very empowered state, okay, you don't see the separation. You allow it all to come in, because even the polarity plays various roles. Now, you do no longer have to play within the polarity. You see it, observe, and you can use bits and pieces of the polarity, but you're not going into polarity. You're now seeing it in a holistic way. You're bringing it into 0 point, neutrality, and so forth. So in the state of neutrality, you got a lot of power in navigating, but also at the same stuff, you're empowered. In neutrality, you actually see yourself as the creator. You see yourself as the navigator. You see yourself as the one that orchestrates, co-creates with whatever's playing out. Now, we're going through a lot of changes right now. We're going through a lot of polarity, a lot of fear. You know, so some people are in a state of fear that, you know, the world's going to fall apart. Others are excited because they're saying, okay, now we have the opportunity to bring forth another way of looking at life, another world. We can bring that part in, and so that we can play in that new world. We don't have to play in the old world of separation. So when we're talking about, again, into the neutrality and aspect of it, you know, you can see every facet of whatever is played out. For example, with all that's going on right now, you say, okay, well, this is the viewpoint of the world right now and what is being projected. So in neutrality, you say, well, great observation. I get to see how people are responding, reacting, and how they're doing all the things that they're doing. But you are not disturbed by it. You just observe it. You feel very powerful in the sense, okay, I observe it. Now, what role do I want to play? And so you're going to be more receptive to seeing what's taking place in the sense of a perfection, a creation. Because all creations are perfections, regardless of how we labeled it, because it's really the label. When we go into our source state, when we get the opportunity to reconnect with ourselves, you can now notice that neutrality is very, very, very natural. It's actually the very foundation of our operating system, because then you're going into 0 point. There's no charge of anyone. You're going into creating, so you're bringing the full spectrum of it. So it's a very, very different way of life. So to bring in a new world, to bring in that aspect of ourselves that has a higher state of being and much more playfulness, then playing in those states brings you to that really deep capacity to be able to be in the creator driver's seat. You had something you want to share?
Yes. Linda asks, what about mass meditation if everyone is focused only on what they want to experience for themselves?
Okay. Well, in any meditation that we get into, okay, is it polarized or not? Because if we're polarizing it and we're bringing that into the intention, then we're looking at it, this is bad, this is good, let's meditate to bring the good, or let's meditate to bring what I want, or anything of that nature. Okay? Again, that's separation. But if you're going into a state of neutrality before, and you now bring in the intention and the meditation, you're now saying, okay, I am now projecting, I'm choosing to project my holistic neutrality state of being into the environment we call the playground of Earth. So if we're going in that, so by bringing love, because I mean, look at it. Love is neutrality, 0 point, full spectrum, holistic, source essence, creator, expanded, and powerful. Why? Because love does not separate. Love is inclusive. Now, we have what we call what's conditional love. We have different versions of love, which again, a lot of it is ego-based anyways. But pure love sees perfection in everything. Pure love really connects with all aspects of the role players, whatever there is. So right now, there are a lot of role players that are unconscious playing negative roles, which is great. You know, they're playing their role. We're choosing to play our role. We're stepping into the more holistic aspect of ourselves. We're going into the source essence, because source consciousness is 0 point, what you can call neutrality and so forth. So you're stepping into that. So now you're beaming out an energy of love, an energy of uplifting, without negating or categorizing or labeling what the perfect experience that's happening right now. You're not saying that's a bad experience, we need to meditate to bring love. No, what you're doing is you're meditating to elevate love within ourselves so that we go more into neutrality, open our eyes even further to be able to see more potentialities and more opportunities on this playground. We've come here for that. We've come here to really experience ourselves in a huge way, in a very open, expanded, playful state. So in doing all of that, going into that part of the experience at this point, we're now looking at the intent behind the meditation. So if I want my world to look a certain way, it's a good point to ask yourself, why do I want it to be this way? Am I not liking my current experience? Or am I judging the current experience? Am I looking at it through positive and negative? These things you want to address, because you want to get into a state of neutrality, because when you are doing the meditation, you want to come from a neutral point through a love state. And I'm not talking about love and hate, because that's a polarity too, which is conditional love in a sense. Well, you meet these requirements, I love you, but it's not true love, because true love, true essence love that we are, sees every creation, every part of it as an absolute beautiful creation and a beautiful expression, and there's nothing outside of that. Because when you go into the source essence, you just feel love for anyone and everything, all of creation. There is no good or bad or right or wrong in that state. You're basically seeing perfection at its ultimate, and that's what we're looking at. So it's really, when it comes to the intentional part, go in the intention to activate neutrality, your state of highest state of love. Basically, you're tapping into that, because all of that is in here. You're going into the 0 point, full spectrum, holistic, source essence. I mean, this is a giveaway right away, source essence. And I know a lot of times people, like to categorize as source essence or God, or whatever you want to call it. A lot of people have different labels and different meanings. I don't use the word because of the fact of all the multitudes of labels that are there. But in the source essence, which we all are part of and are as part of that field, in that source essence, it sees perfection in all of creation. So creation is creation, and creation is an opportunity to experience, an opportunity to self-discover, an opportunity to become even a grander aspect of itself. Even source itself continues to expand. It's not outside of that. It really, really looks at every opportunity to experience, and that is the very innate composition and operating, our natural operating system within ourselves. So as we're going through our natural state of reconnecting to our natural operating system, all of this polarity stuff fades away because you're now going into neutrality. So when it comes to the idea of passion, well, in neutrality, I'm not going to have passion. What is passion? Passion is tapping into that beautiful creator expressor that you are and doing so, because that's coming through you, because it is you emanating in your creation. So that passion would be doing whatever you love, whatever that may be. And that changes because passions do shift here and there, because it depends on what role you're choosing to play. But in neutrality is expanded passion, because look at it this way. When you're in positive and negative, you may have a passion on something, but as long as these two are active within yourself, you're going to start categorizing and labeling and shrinking the whatever you're doing, a passion. For example, you want to share a certain message with the world, okay? Now, as long as you're in polarity, you're not in neutrality, you have to hear the smallest negative feedback, and guess what? Your passion dwindles. You may be excited to get it out there. You're excited about what you want to share. And then somebody says, oh, you're crazy. What are you saying? This doesn't make any sense. Look at our world, whatever it is. And before you know, your passion drops. The other thing is, when you're experiencing life, and you may run into, say, so-called obstacles, or you may run through challenges. Now, of course, we're going to bring those opportunities within ourselves, not only to experience, but to also allow any programs that are related to it to come purge. So, say you get to a point where you run into some obstacles and so forth. How many of us have been passionate to do something, and you run into obstacles and the passion just dwindles off too? And then you start questioning yourself, maybe that is not my passion, because if it was my passion, then I should feel empowered instead of retreating and feeling all of this stuff that's going on. So that's the difference. But when you're in neutrality and you allow that passion to come through, because in neutrality you will have passion, absolutely. And it's pure. And the beautiful way, you want to share, okay, with the world what the message you have, or the beauty of your artistic experience or skill sets, or whatever that may be. Now, you may hear negative feedback of some sort. That does not even affect you, because you say, oh, that's great, that's interesting, doesn't even matter. Because your passion doesn't dwindle because of it. You run into an obstacle and say, oh, okay, look at what I have to play with. Okay, let's take a look at how I can redirect this and shape it so that I can continue doing what I need to do. Maybe I need to hone up my skills, or maybe I need to let go of certain stories and programs that are still obstacles within ourselves or myself, So that's what you're looking at. So in neutrality, it doesn't matter what's going on, and opinions from other people do not affect you in any way, or whatever the circumstance is. You could look at it right now and say, look at the world. I can't go do what I want to do because now we're in shutdown, or that we have this fear of some sort. And the ego's going to say that, of course, in polarity. So, well, there's a good time and a bad time to do this. But in neutrality, it says, okay, I'm looking at this opportunity, whatever it is, and how can I bring out what I have to offer in the means and opportunities and potentialities that I have available, or what avenues I can take to do so. You're not looking at, oh, I got to wait until things get better. No, you're going to work at or take steps now. You're going to take steps at that with whatever is there, because no matter what is playing out is always an opportunity for you to do whatever you need to do. So your passion becomes rock solid and expands. And if it shifts a little bit, you may have to fine-tune the direction, because maybe the path is starting to change. But the passion is there. The passion of being alive, the passion of being in a body, the passion of sharing, the passion of using the skill sets that you have, the passion of making a difference in people, the passion of just living life in whatever's going on. So in neutrality, you get to live more in the purest sense, this passion. You get to live and experience yourself very wide open and clear than any other way of experiencing when you're in the polarity world, in the polarity aspect of ourselves. So this is how you see how powerful is neutrality. Now, say you have something that plays out in your life. As long as you're in wrong, right, good, bad, or emotional charges and stories and so forth, the potentiality of how to adjust that becomes very limited. So one of the tools you can use is you can go into meditation, quieten the mind, allow yourself to go into that neutral state, activating 0 point, activating neutrality, activating your source essence. And then what looked like as a very finite, small potentiality of an opportunity or something to, as options to change something, now opens up. Because now you're seeing more and more. Not only that, you're also able to plug in not only your own personal experience, but experiences from what your soul provides, your human entity provides, your body provides, and others around you provide, just in receiving the messages within yourself. Even though if there's no verbal exchange, you're tapping into a cluster of consciousness. There's a huge cluster of unlimited access of consciousness and potentiality in neutrality. When you're polarized, they're in compartments and they're very small, and they usually carry a very emotional charge, which creates blocks within ourselves and creates certain energy imprints with our body. And so our body ends up reacting in certain ways. So you see the difference between the two. There's huge difference between the two. You're no longer looking at, the limit that you may have had. The same thing with limits. For example, I've had people that, are having challenges in their business. And of course, now they're looking at, I need to find a solution. I need to find a solution. Now, if they're still in positive negative, meaning if I fix this, I could possibly make headway. But if I don't fix this, or if I can't find a solution, my negative thing is I'm going to fail. Not only fail, I'm going to basically...
Yeah, you did it right. F-A-I-L.
Yeah. I'm going to fail in my life, or the fact that I'm going to crash and the end of the world comes along in my own personal experience, for example, right? So what I suggest with them is to go into a meditative state and basically put aside all of the polarity stuff, in a sense going into a quiet state and accessing that neutrality within themselves, putting away what's positive outcome and the negative outcome, and the negative and positive potentiality. Because a lot of times that's all it is potentiality, but a lot of it is mind construct by either a story, program, belief systems, or collective consciousness, or anything of that nature. So you put that all aside. You're not going to give power to the fact, if I don't get this fixed, I'm going to fail, I'm going to go bankrupt, or I'm going to lose my job, or anything of that nature. You're going to put all that out of the way. You're going to move it out of the way, and you're going to tap into what we call neutrality. By going into the meditative state, quieting yourself, as those options are there, say, no, I'm releasing all options. I choose from this moment to see a bigger picture. So what you're doing is now you're going to go into the quiet state, and you're basically, your viewpoint, your access points, your resources expand. This is a lot of times where the imagination, creativity, things that you never even thought of, like the black and white. It's either I make it and I'm okay and I'll be able to survive a little longer, or I'm going to fail and I'm going to drown. It goes way beyond that, because now it doesn't have the black and white anymore. It sees the full spectrum, all spectrums, and then more opportunities are there. And it's like, oh, wow, I never even thought of this. I have plan C, D, E, F, G, and yeah, nobody's done this, but somehow it feels right for me. Because what you're doing is you're tapping into that larger pool of potentiality, which is not only limited in our experience, but it's also from not only limited to our collective on planet Earth, but it's collective from even our solar system, galaxy, and universe. So that becomes part of it. When you're tapping into source essence, there's multitudes of opportunities and so forth. And then you can decide which one you want to implement as you move forward. So you're no longer seeing it from a very, very limited viewpoint. You're seeing it in a bigger point. In neutrality, you're not also reacting in fear. You're not reacting in emotional charges. You're not reacting to your environment. You're in a calmer state, so that not only are you seeing a bigger picture, but you're no longer driven by chemistry within your body or the reactions or anything of that nature. So you can see it, because look at how many times when we're calmer, we see not only more potentiality, but you see the beauty of whatever's playing out, which you couldn't see before. Okay, and also the opportunity, what you can do. Did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you maybe to talk a little bit about, when you were talking about that, the fear or the anger or the horror that comes up when stuff comes out, like about, how the child sex slavery stuff and pedophilia comes up. People automatically react to that on an emotional level, on lots of levels, and it's hard for people to, I think, get neutral in those situations.
Right.
And it's like, because it's a global thing too, like we all respond, I think, in a similar fashion. So maybe just go over how to stay neutral in those kinds of situations, because we may be seeing more of that come up.
Well, yes, and that's an excellent point, because right now a lot of stuff, the people call disclosure and things like that. What is this as disclosure? And sometimes people relate to, disclosure is that, they're aliens, all right? But no, it's disclosure about what's really been playing on the back end of things, right? To kind of come to the surface where we're actually looking at what's some things that we haven't paid attention to, like the pedophiles and whatever else, the slavery, sex slavery, whatever else, all of these things that come up. So they're coming up. There's going to be more and more stuff coming up to the surface, potential idea of corruption and so forth, right? So it's easy to get caught up in the agenda of reacting one way or another. And this is the thing. The tendency, because of the programs, is not our natural tendency, it's our reactive tendency. The program part, we'll see that is negative. That's a bad thing. And not only do we need to feel bad, we need to demonize the role players. We need to look at this. We need to squash this. This is wrong, right? And the positive, you don't even see the positive as there, because in essence, you're not looking at the opportunities that are there. So in that regards, whenever you see that, and if an emotional charge comes up for you, then you're outside of neutrality, you're in polarity. So in polarity, you're going to feel the rights and wrongs and goods and bad, what's fair, what's not fair, and all of that. So it's very instrumental and very key for ourselves to get into that neutral state and say, okay, I've just seen all this pedophile stuff coming up. I've seen the bank corruptions. I've seen the control structures going in and running our world and whatever else. And now for the first time I'm seeing it. And this is where it becomes an issue, because, not an issue, but an interesting observation is that people, when they don't know what's going on, they seem to be okay with day-to-day life. And all of a sudden something gets uncovered, and now it's like this kicks in big time. Now, where's that led by? Ego. Because ego says, if I can get you emotionally charged, if I can get you to stay in, the positive, negative, right, wrong, good, bad, and all of that stuff, then I got you not only in fear, but I got you to make whatever choices that are based. Now, of course, they're going to use stories, programs, whatever that may be. So when you're looking at this, you want to definitely get into the neutral state, into neutrality. So you're going to focus on the breath, and you're just seeing yourself as source, and see everything else that's playing out, even the so-called victims, as part of source. It's part of you. It's another aspect of you. Okay? So you now look at it as the full spectrum of aspects of you. playing particular roles, and you get to see the roles, okay? You get to see it, and now what happens is with that, you see the perfection, but you also see the opportunity that we no longer have to give power to those roles. So you're going to respond in a way where, okay, we're done with that. Now it's time for us, yes, it's coming to the surface so that we can negate it. We can get it out of our equation, out of our way of life. We don't have to keep plugging it in because we've got that opportunity. We've got to play that polarized world. Because the victim-victimizer, taking advantage of people or kids or anything of that nature, is victim-victimizer role. So we can get easily engaged in the victim-victimizer role because then you could see them as victims even more than they already feel as victims. And then the ones that are victimizers, they can see themselves as victimizers, but now they're even much more powerful in the victimizing role because we've given more power. And this really just continues to ramp up. And this is why a lot of times right now people are getting so emotionally charged. Positive, negative, right, wrong, good, bad, we got to fix the evil in the world or anything of that nature. Well, it doesn't mean that a negative, what we call that negative, because from a source aspect, for a neutrality, there's no negative, but at the same time, those separated experience of victim, victimizer, right, wrong, good, bad, positive, negative, all of that stuff, you see it, okay, we no longer have to create the separation. We no longer have to, so let's bring it together, merge it and see it as a beautiful dance and negate or neutralize all of that into neutrality so that neither role has to be played. Not the victim doesn't have to play the role, the victimizer doesn't have to play the role. The rights and wrongs don't have to be part of it anymore because now we're not separating it, we just see it as an experience. Now, of course, I've heard people say, well, in neutrality, then you're not going to take action. Well, no, in neutrality, you take quite a bit of action, but you take it in a neutral state where you're actually putting it out of the equation rather than going into fight and flight. Because this is what happens. As long as you're polarized, you're going to fight. And in fighting, you're actually giving power to what you're fighting. And not only giving power to what you're fighting, you're disempowering yourself. You're also seeing yourself in accentuating the polarity part of the right, wrong, good, bad, and all of that. So what happens as the stages we go through the unconscious state of what's happening, then we become aware of what's happening, and then we go into the accentuated polarity, because we were already in polarity before, but now we're more accentuated polarity. But eventually, as you become more aligned and connected with yourself, you see no longer the polarity. So now you're bringing in consciousness and say, yes, that's how we played the game. That's how we did whatever we did at that point in time. However, how does it still serve us right now? Do we still need to perpetuate that positive, negative, right, wrong, good, bad? And you come to the realization that it's no longer required, so you're able to make those shifts take place within the environment. Because look at it this way. Many of us, don't realize that when we're looking in the world, a lot of what we're looking at is still a reflection of what we are projecting collectively. Okay? So how are we going to continue to shift our reality on a collective scale if we're still giving power to the polarity? If you see the perfection in it and you bring the consciousness that that is no longer, then each one of us that are transmitting that on a global scale, and the fact of having our experience actually starts to break down the polarity part, and you're bringing things to neutrality, to 0 point, to source essence, to all of those components that come into. And then what you're doing is you're creating a difference or a change within the playground. Because the playground is a reflection of us on a collective scale. And you can say, well, I'm just one. Like yourself, you may say, I'm just one. Or, there's a very small group. But that small group, which continues to grow in a very massive way, is very impactful, much more impactful than the polarized, because what you're doing is, if you're in the positive negative part, your contribution to your reality is greatly limited. So when you're in neutrality and in all of this, your powerful state, creator, expanded, source essence, holistic, full spectrum, 0 point, which is basically all neutrality, in that neutrality, the power that you have within yourself is not 10x. it's 20,000x. So you negate 20,000 negative inputs for each, and what I call negative, polarized input versus one neutrality. And that's where it stands, and it continues to grow because the Gaia and everything else around us, and even the energies that are coming on the planet, are accentuating that even further, so that we're getting so much more support energetically, consciously, and so forth, so that it's not just us. We're just one of the conduits, and the conduits are becoming much more powerful because we have backup in that. Go ahead.
So it's about bringing compassion to both the victim and the victimizer.
Yes, compassion, but really love.
Yeah.
Love and appreciation for the roles. Because again, for anybody to play any particular role, they have to agree. They may not be conscious, but they have to agree. And a lot of times when we agree, when we're looking at from neutrality, we see that they had selected that journey for themselves to aid the collective, so that we can create a saturation point where we no longer have to give power to the positive negative victim-victimizer. So you have a great appreciation and love for the victimizer. You have a great appreciation and love for the one that's playing the victim role. We've all played victim-victimizer at one point or another, either in this life or even previous lives. In this life, we could have played both. We can go back and forth because it depends on our state. But when we look at it from a love, appreciation, it really, really alters the construct that holds this polarity in place. So this is why I say, even clearing out our stories and programs, if you acknowledge it, you appreciate it for what it's provided you, and you send it love, true love, from the very essence of you, it then dissolves. And it's the same thing about the game of life. If you're bringing appreciation and love for those roles, because either role, I mean, if you have recollections to previous lives, or even recollections of times when you played the victim and then played the victimizer and vice versa, taking whatever turns, you can see that how playing either role was difficult. And it's not like it felt holistic. It didn't feel natural to you, because it wasn't natural, but you got to experience it anyway. So for the one that has to play the negative role, it's very hard for them to lower their frequency enough to be able to play it. Meanwhile, the one that's playing the victim has also lowered their frequency to play it, because in essence, both are operating in lower frequencies. If they're operating in higher frequencies, they wouldn't even play those roles. You can't even play those roles. So they had to agree to come down to those roles, because you can't say, well, you know, the victim is the positive and the victimizer is the negative. No, they're both playing in that polarized, separated, negative aspect of it. Then the one that comes in as a savior, that wants to play the role of the savior, might think that they're doing something positive, but they have to play in the negative to be able to be the savior, because then you're not appreciating and loving where they're at. Like I said, it's not that you don't take any action. You take action to bring clarity that we no longer have to support this. So this is why, you know, you share certain information and say, yes, that's something we have adopted. That's something that we've played with, you know, could be thousands of years at this point in time. And yes, we played the polarized world. We played the right, wrong, good, bad. We played the victim, victimizer, all of that. Perfect, absolutely amazing. But now, does that still serve? Does that actually become part of where we are growing into or expanding into, or the consciousness provides us for at this time? That new us coming over, that newest version of you going into playing our particular playground we call life, or the world, or whatever you want to call it. Because in essence, what we're looking at in all of that, we're bringing that to the surface so that we actually can upgrade. So the whole point is to bring the new you in. That new you is neutrality, 0 point, full spectrum, holistic, source essence, created, expanded, and powerful.
And love.
And love.
That in there.
I got to throw that one in there somewhere. I got to put that right up here. Love. Okay. This is why we say when we're tapping into source, we feel not only unconditional love, we feel ultimate love. Ultimate love is very powerful, very creative, very capacitating. Capacitating? Is that the word?
I think so.
No. Okay. I'm making up a word here. full capacity to really get into the accentuation of creation and all the possibilities and opportunities. So this is the thing, and when we go back to what neutrality represents, I've explained it. The power within it, when you tap into that, your expanded potentialities and expanded playfulness and expanded opportunity to really go outside of any boxes and limits and so forth that you have created for yourself is immense. In neutrality, you are freer to play. For example, let me give you one more example. You have a particular a gathering that you're going to go to. Okay, so there's a family gathering coming up. And here you are. You have issues within yourself because certain role players at the family gathering makes you feel bad. Okay? And why does it make you feel bad? Because there's a story attached to it and whatever else. So that's fine. You got the story. But here you are. You have this opportunity presented to you to go to the family gathering. Okay? And this is beyond, preference part. This, we're looking at it. And you ask yourself, how do I feel about going? Well, I don't want to go because such and such teases me. I don't feel like going because such and such will judge me. And then I'm going to feel small, or I'm going to feel insignificant, or whatever that is. Well, for any of those stories to even have any power, you're basically here. Positive, negative. You're still in polarity, right? So you have to be playing with that. And then, of course, the ego likes to play with all of that. So it's putting its 15 cents in there. We're not even talking 2 cents anymore because inflation. It's putting in bucket loads. So, however, in neutrality, when you access that neutrality, of course, you can choose the preference if you go there or not. But there's no emotional charge. There's no good, bad, right, wrong about it. When you're tapping into that neutrality, you now see that environment with the family gathering as an opportunity to experience yourself in any which way. It doesn't matter if such and such compares you with others, or such and such may say certain things, or you may be teased, or the fact that the idea of feeling small or anything that wouldn't come into it, because in neutrality it sees, oh, this is a beautiful opportunity for me to go play. And I am in full control of how I design or choose to play. So it's a very completely expanded, different way of looking at it through neutrality. Now, at that point, in neutrality, you can use the projected vision experience. So what you can do is you can close your eyes, you access neutrality, you go into that neutral state. There's no right, wrong, good, bad about it. The role players are just role players. You're not giving any power to the role players. You're not even giving power to your ego or the story. Then you look at yourself and say, okay, I have 2 options right now. Well, maybe more than 2, maybe 3. But let's say we take the 2 options. One option is A, I go. Okay? So you can envision yourself going. Envision yourself engaging with the family dynamics. You can envision yourself being amongst them, communicating with them, and so forth. Now, that will give you a sense of resonance or not. Not polarity. Not, oh, I feel bad. No, because then you're still in polarity. You're still, ego-driven there. So you're now looking at it and say, okay, that's how it feels if I go. How does it resonate? The energy's there, whatever it is. You're not going to have any issues with the energy, but the energy is still there. So you say, how do I resonate? You can still continue with that process, and then you see yourself not going. Okay, so you don't go. And see how that feels for you. And of course, the story goes, oh, it's family, you need to be going there, or my parents will expect me there, or whoever that may be that expects me. You're going to put all that aside. You're going to look at it and say, okay, I'm not going. How does that feel? How does that feel in resonance? Then you're actually looking at it from the neutral point, the 2 preferences or potentialities that can one become more of a preference than the other. And then you choose the one that feels most in resonance. The third option is you can go for a short while and then go visit some friends after that without staying there for the full duration. If it's a 1-day, 2-day, 3-day event, You can choose to do part of it. So you can plug those options and say, okay, how does it feel to go there? You're not going to go in neutrality, oh, I got to go put in my time. You're not going in neutrality saying, oh, I got to have to endure this. I'm going to have to suck it up because they expect me to be there. You're not going there. That's not how it works. In neutrality, you just see it as a playground, or a smaller version of the playground of the collective, and say, okay, I'm going to go play with those things, and how does it feel for me? And what opportunities do I have with myself to really enjoy the experience? Because this is the beauty of it. You're here to enjoy all experiences. Yes, there are certain experiences that may not be where you want to focus on or experience, but that's free for you to choose. It's very very open in that regard. So you could see the power you have in neutrality. So it's not about feeling peshy about anything. It's about really seeing the whole and playing with the whole to the dynamics you want to play. In neutrality, stories don't have any power, so you can move through it much easier. Belief systems, stories, trauma, programs, whatever is played out. History, our stories of what we call the past, what happened in our past. In neutrality, you just become the observer. You're observing what played out, taking out all the beautiful tidbits in between, all the rest of it. Okay, it was great. I got to experience whatever. And you can empower yourself by looking at it and say, yeah, I went down this path, but it felt a certain way, and that's not how I feel now. So you could see, and the neutrality part now is very instrumental, especially with everything that's unfolding right now and will continue to unfold, because there's a lot of other things that we are doing through these changes that we're going through. So a lot of things are going to feel unsettled. A lot of things are going to feel outside of what we've been accustomed to. We're also, even though it may not have felt comfortable for you at different stages in your life, we still created a sense of comfort because we kind of knew what was going on, right? And when I say going on, you knew where every choice brought you, regardless if it was polarized or not. But right now we're not doing that, because right now we're breaking down a lot of these patterns. So we're going to go through what people call uncertainty. Well, the uncertainty opens us up for more possibilities, opportunities. So really the uncertainty is something that we are cherishing within ourselves, because it's saying, okay, we're going into uncharted territories. I get to play more than ever in those uncharted territories, and I'm not going to be limited in the idea that I have to be afraid of it, because the ego is going to try to say, well, it's uncharted. We don't know what the outcome is. There is no outcome. Like I talked about it on Saturday, we're living moment by moment. Each moment, how can we utilize what's there to play for us? Right now, some of us are locked up in home, being the fact of quarantined or whatever it is, right? So let me look at the opportunity. I'm living in the moment. What can I possibly do that I haven't been even taking the time to do before? Or what other opportunities do I have to play the way I need to play? And so you could see more of the opportunity and be able to navigate, because we're living moment by moment. In the moment by moment, if you stay current in the moment by moment, the accessing of neutrality, 0 point, full spectrum, holisticness, holistic, well, probably,
That's good.
it's okay. Source essence, and creating a much more expanded and a powerful state, you get to see how much more you have available to yourself. So Kimberly, is there anything else that you wanted to address around neutrality that I might have missed covering?
No, I don't think so.
How do you find yourself in the state of neutrality? What some of the benefits that you've gained from being in that state yourself, whenever things are playing out?
But you can stay much calmer amongst a crazy world sometimes. So you're like in the eye of the storm.
Mm.
So
That's a good point.
So you're not getting tossed around with everything, and but it's up to you to, of course, be realizing it is playing out for a reason, a certain way, and it's really always acknowledging that, and always stepping back into the observer point of view so that you can look at it through those eyes. Yeah, so it does help a lot actually in a lot of situations, in situations with family, in situations when you lose loved ones, in situations where the rest of the world seems to be going crazy. I mean, it keeps you grounded, it keeps you solid in who you are.
So how do you find it when there is some chaos around you, say even in the family dynamics, by maintaining a neutrality? How do you find, does it really broaden anything for you? Does it give you a different
Yeah, it
viewpoint?
gives you a broader perspective for sure, because you can see how things are playing out a certain way. You're not caught up in it, so as soon as you engage your emotional self and get caught up in a story, then you narrow your focus completely, and you can't see the big picture the same.
And other possibilities
And
and
other
other opportunities, or
possibilities,
even
and
to hold a certain level of clarity for the people that are in the family dynamics going
definitely you
through
get a
whatever.
different level of clarity in a situation when you're in neutrality, for sure.
Because even when there's stuff going on amongst family dynamics or anything of that nature, and everybody's panicking or whatever, just somebody holding that space of neutrality and seeing the perfection in all of it, and but be able to kind of access all of the things that while they're reacting in positive, negative, or in the polarity, they're not able to see, but you to be able to see it and just to interject that and to share it with them already starts to causing a calming. Plus, your energy, while you're in neutrality, is very soothing, very calming, it's very opening, it's very solid in the sense of sourceness within yourself. So that really breaks down the dynamics, because when you get a bunch of people that are panicking, they're fueling each other. It's ego against ego and whatever else, or ego supporting each other. But when somebody comes in and you're in neutrality and that calmness, then you're breaking the pattern, and there's cooler minds, clearer minds come into play at times. Now, of course, some may not want to play there, but
Well, it's also beneficial if, even if you can't say something about what's going on, which often happens sometimes in my family, can't always say everything that's on my mind about the situation. So saying nothing and just holding a space is perhaps sufficient sometimes.
yeah, it is. It's always beneficial. Is it impactful enough to really shake things up? On the back end, yes. Because what happens? While you're holding that energy within you, their higher selves are being supported in the sense where it's going, yes, now that feels natural. Now the ego mind will still be running amok, but that sense of calmness, so reaction, 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 but there's a reinforced calmness that comes from within because someone there is emanating that frequency. So yes, it's powerful on so many levels.
But you also still have to be mindful that when you feel like you're being calm in a situation, I know I feel I've been calm in a situation, but inwardly there's still little triggers coming up about right, wrong. So it's really being aware of your reactions to
Yeah,
still.
and even with that, that's a good point. You have to be observing of yourself to see what comes up, because you definitely want to address that if you especially have the positive, negative, right, wrong, good, bad, and all that stuff that's still playing out. So you're saying, okay, it's my job to stay calm, but meanwhile there's still a little bit of agitation within yourself or your programs of what is good or bad or anything of that nature. For example, especially when you're dealing with a family member and everybody's congregating together to make a decision of some sort for a particular family member, of course everybody's going to have their opinion and so forth, and you may say, no, I see the bigger picture, but then there's still maybe some programs within you that are still active to some degree, and that may bring up certain parts of it. So you want to address it so that you actually are not triggered by them. You know, because you're basically giving yourself the opportunity, because everything, every experience, every interaction is always an opportunity for us to get to the next level of clarity, the next level of neutrality, source essence. Okay. Anything else?
Well, Erin has asked, when will the rest catch up? How does that look? That will
Well,
quick.
things are moving very quickly for a lot of people, and you have to look at the world as being challenged, or people, all our brothers, sisters, souls on the planet here are being challenged in one way or another, bringing things up. As to when, it's really up to us how long we are, or how entrenched we are in any of the old patterns. But more of us that are shifting creates much more powerful ripple effect. So realistically, we want to neutralize the polarity part within the 3 years, which we've already started, and that's the intent. We can do it a lot sooner. But again, it's really work on yourself, work with sharing with others too at the same time. But let everybody just kind of finish, because a lot of people are getting into deeper polarity part of it just so that they can wrap it up, get to that saturation point. So it's like, you have one of those cloths that suck up water and so forth. As long as it's not fully saturated, you can still keep picking up more liquids, for example. I can't remember what those cloths are called, but anyway.
Like a chamois?
A chamois, yeah, so it was a chamois. It would just keep. But when you get to the saturation point, what happens is it won't pick up anymore, but it starts to release it bit by bit. So it gets to the point where I'm done with this, and you start wringing it out. And that's when you get to the saturation point of this polarity aspect, ego, fear, and all of that stuff, and say, okay, I'm now purging. And many of us are at that state, are doing that. But you have to give the opportunity for others, appreciate others to get to that saturation point. So look at it this way. If somebody's going through intense experiences, you can share some clarity if they're open to it. If not, you just love them and appreciate them for their journey, because they need that, because they're not ready to shift it. The same way as us. We all held out until we got to the point where we said, okay, I'm done with this. With no judgment, no polarity part that was a bad experience. No, you see it as a beautiful experience, but I'm done with that. I no longer need to play there. And that's really, we have to have patience with what we call patience, an understanding, a compassion. Now, when I say compassion, we're talking about not a compassion of feeling bad for people. It's a compassion of understanding that they need to go through what they need to go through, and a compassion that then, in a sense, that they are going through different stages, the same ways we have and others have and will and still are at this point in time. So it's really about, so when somebody says, well, are you compassionate? I say, well, I appreciate and love everybody for whatever experience they're going. And I'm compassionate that they're doing what they're doing, but I at the same time love them for what they're doing, so that they can now really create a shift within themselves. Then collectively they will be also supporting all the shift that's happening in the world. Okay, so I think we got it covered there, the whole neutrality part. And I wanted to make it clear because of the fact there was a lot of misunderstanding, and really not everybody understood the power behind neutrality and what really it represents. Because as source essence, we are very powerful, and we create an open platform without any limits. So it's full spectrum, all aspects of it. So. Okay, so thank you again, and we'll see you on Saturday. And we either do another episode where we're covering another topic, or we may arrange to do a global meditation. Now, this will be available if you choose to participate. I know there's a global meditation going on internationally, and we're doing that on our own, but it's collectively at a certain time. I think it's later in the evening. However, if anybody feels that they want to gather online and do it together, then I'm more than open to facilitate it with you, so that you are guided through it, but don't feel that you need to do the guided meditation with myself and all the other people that are participating. The global one's going to happen anyways, and so I'm just offering it as an opportunity for us to link in. It's not going to be separate. It's going to be linked in, but we're also going to go into really powerful neutrality and a great appreciation and love for the dance of life at this point in time, so that we can shift it. Did you want to say something about that?
No,
I haven't looked at that whole post yet about the global meditation.
Yeah, we
what's
don't-
involved, so we haven't really checked that out.
Okay.
We're going to look at it after with this.
Okay.
So I know it was at 10:45 Eastern Standard Time for us. So I know
It depends on different hours.
depends on where you are on the planet.
So anyways, we'll provide it. We will do our part, and we'll bring in the highest vibration possible to be able to transmit that for not only for ourselves, like meaning all of you that will choose to participate, but also to support all the changes that are going in place right now. Because what we want to do is actually bring that other energy beyond fear, beyond limitation, beyond the chaos that we've given a lot of power to it. So we'll see you on Saturday. Either I will be posting it on Facebook and let you know about it if we're just going to do an episode or we're going to do the meditation.
Is the episode still going to be at 4 on Saturday, or are we going to do it a little earlier? We'll
Well,
decide.
if we do the episode, we'll have to decide on that
So
because we
just
have some things that we have to work
Pay
through.
attention to Franco's Facebook page.
Yeah.
And he will post a time as soon as we figure out what time it's going to be on Saturday, for just this series.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And yes, and then we'll let you also know in the post if we're actually doing the meditation. We're planning
Yeah.
to do it. We're going to do it anyways. So it's just, do we add the episode 2 and do the meditation, or we just do the meditation?
Yeah,
So,
we'll see.
yeah. So we'll let you know because we may have 2 parts on Saturday, depending. But if we do have it, we may have it earlier in the day for the episode part. Okay. So thank you again for co-creating this. And until Saturday, go out and play and have some fun.